Hello, and welcome to today's Contourl webinar, using M365 to create a personal data inventory. First, for some housekeeping items. Today's presentation will be recorded. We'll share this recording with you via email tomorrow. At the end of today's presentation, we'll show a list of upcoming complimentary webinars. If you or any of your colleagues are interested in joining future sessions, please visit us at contourl.com and select the Events tab to register. We'll also share white papers, blog posts, and articles we've recently published. We invite you to complete our brief post-event survey at the end of the webinar. We truly value and appreciate your feedback. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please always feel free to reach out to us at info@contourl.com. And now allow me to introduce today's speakers: Tom Mighell, COO of Contourl, Kerry Childe, Contourl Senior Consultant, and Nandeep Mehta, Senior Consultant with Contourl.
Everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. My name is Tom Mighell. I am Chief Operating Officer at Contourl. We're happy to be talking to you today, and I am very pleased to be joined by two of our expert consultants. I have Kerry Childe, a senior consultant who specializes in privacy and information governance, and I have Nandeep Mehta, who is one of our technical senior consultants who has deep experience in Microsoft 365. We're going to be walking through the topic today of sort of privacy and Microsoft 365 and how they might be able to help you get control of personal information in your organization. We are seeing more and more privacy laws come out that are requiring the creation or maintenance of what's called a personal data inventory, understanding what personal data you have in your organization, where it goes, how it lives within your organization. And we've also seen a lot of questions around how to manage that appropriately. What's the best way to keep control of it? And we have a way that we believe is very cost effective and efficient for those of you who do have Microsoft 365 and assorted applications within your environment. And that's what we want to talk about today. And so you're gonna hear a lot from Kerry and Nandeep today on why these are why this is something that we think you can easily do within your organization. Just a quick reminder, Contourl is an independent provider. We don't sell any products. We don't provide reactive e-discovery services. We may be talking about technology today, but we do not take any referral fees or have any relationships with anybody that we're going to be talking about today. So let's start out really with the basics. Why a personal data inventory and why is it necessary, and really kind of what is it? And Kerry, I think that the real first question is going to be, we're going to call it PDI throughout the rest of this, but what is a PDI and why should people be caring about this?
Thanks, Tom, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope that this is super informational. Before I forget, if you have questions, please feel free to drop those in the questions tab on your screen. We'll be happy to answer those throughout as we get to them. So what is a PDI? What's a personal data inventory? And it can be anything, but it's basically a catalog for understanding what information, what personal information your organization collects, and then what it does with it, and then what happens to it after that. So it's going to look at what's being collected, used, stored, shared, mapping that to your business processes, and also the systems and the process owners and system owners. You need a PDI because it's going to give you visibility and accountability into your data. It is not possible to comply with or appropriately manage the personal information in your organization if you don't know what you have and where it is. So a PDI is going to help you understand what you have and where it is and what you're doing with it by answering some of those really important questions, including why are you collecting it and using this information, which is a really important question now that we have 20 US comprehensive privacy laws plus all of the privacy laws across the globe. So a PDI is foundational for, as I said, complying with those requirements, right? You can't comply, you can't properly manage if you don't know what you have and where it is, but it's also going to help you implement appropriate security retention and access controls and to respond efficiently and effectively to audits, investigations, data subject requests in the event of a security breach, any of those kinds of things. Knowing what you have and where it is going to help you be better at privacy, security, information governance. If you don't have those things, your organization is going to be operating absolutely blindly because you don't know what you have, you don't know where it is. It's like trying to walk around a dark room that you've never been in. There's going to be regulatory risk, you're going to have security gaps, you're going to have operational efficiencies. It's just going to be a giant mess. Nandeep, what am I missing?
No, you're right on. I mean, that's what it is basically. Bottom line is that, without a well-maintained PDI, teams are typically forced to operate on, tribal or very less knowledge that they have about the information that lives within the organization. That creates higher regulatory exposure. There are hidden security gaps, and it's really slow then and more expensive also to respond to any time there is a request from another subject to produce information, change anything, or delete, because you do not really know where all of that information is. So it is absolutely essential to produce an information to have a proper, well-maintained PDI.
So we've talked about the privacy applications to this, the reason why it's important from a privacy standpoint, but it turns out that personal data inventory also has benefits beyond privacy. Is that right, Kerry?
No, of course it is. No, absolutely. A PDI is going to give you not just, what you have and where it is, but it's also going to help you do a lot of the things that organizations are required to do, right? I said security breach, so data breach management and recovery. If you know what personal information you have and where it is, then if a particular system suffers a security breach, you're going to be much more easily able to quickly identify the risk and the potential fallout from that breach. Litigation hold and e-discovery. Obviously, what you have and where it is really important for understanding what it is you need to be able to understand and to put on hold. Records of processing activities. If you are required to do a ROPA because you are an entity that is subject to GDPR or the UK GDPR, your PDI is going to help you do a ROPA appropriately because you're going to have all of that information listed and you're going to be able to quickly be able to maintain your ROPA. It's going to give you great metrics. If you are managing a privacy program, it's going to help you do the important work of putting numbers to your program, because quite frankly, privacy programs tend to really fall down when it comes to trying to appropriately implement, identify and implement KPIs. This is going to give you a good way to do that. It's also going to help you update your notices, your access requests, respond to third party, make sure that you've got your third party processes and contracts under control. It's also, and this is not new news, but it's certainly not old news, up until July of 2025, this was an important thing. It was impossible to comply without it, but it wasn't mandated. But that changed. Minnesota's consumer data privacy law went into effect July 31st of 2025, and Minnesota requires a data inventory. So you've got one state law that mandates that you have a data inventory, but where one goes, many follow. And I think we can expect to see that filtering out through other laws as they move forward and also get amended. But even if you have no customers in Minnesota, you are not in Minnesota, you're not sure you could find Minnesota on a map, that's fine. It's still incredibly important to have a PDI because you can't comply without understanding your data.
All right, so we've talked about why it's important, how it can benefit you, kind of what goes into a PDI. What are the components of it? We're not necessarily just talking about personal information. What about the personal information? What do we need to have that is included inside that PDI?
So in order to have your personal data inventory be useful, You want to know what you have, what you do with it, and what happens to it after that, which means that you're going to need, you're absolutely right, information other than just, a list of the data elements, because that doesn't tell you anything. Knowing that you're collecting name and address does not give you any information at all, but that's a good place to start. So you need your catalog of the personal data elements that are collected or held, but you need to understand the basis for processing that data, right? Why are you collecting it? What is that information being used for? Where does it live when you've collected it? What are the other parts of the organization that have access to it and that use it? How does it fall through your organization? How long are you holding on to it? And if you have a process to share that information with internal or external third parties, which may be a standard part of the practice because that's part of what you're doing, you need to understand who are the third parties who get that information and why. And there are lots of really good reasons why information has to leave your organization and go to a third party. If you are a retailer who sells things online, you are unlikely to also have completely implemented your entire own supply chain and logistics processes. So you probably have shippers, right? So customer comes to your website, purchases things from you, but then you have to provide their name and address to the shipper so that the thing they ordered can get delivered. Totally legitimate reason, but you want to make sure that you understand why that information is leaving your organization and what the purpose of it is, because you'll remember that privacy laws specifically mandate that information only be used for the purposes for which it was collected. So let's understand why it was collected in the first place and make sure that we can draw that through line all the way through the data flow. Nandeep, what else?
I guess you're right. I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention when I'm looking at, repositories that holding the data and how long you keep data is one of the data points we always collect is how long you're keeping the data, and retention is an important part of that too. And it ties very closely with, the personal information as well, because that's one place, if you know that you are, as an organization, following your policy, as long as you're following the policy, even if it's personal information and a request comes from someone to remove that data, as long as you are in compliance with your policy, you don't have to. But if you are not following the policy, there is no other option than to just let that information go away if the request comes. And so it's kind of tied with a lot of different things, and that is also, it's not just the personal information, but of a lot of other things that we collect, like Kerry said earlier, even for e-discovery and for the holds, and all that impacts around the personal information that you're holding and keeping for a long period. And as long as it's for the business purpose, and then it's qualified for the business purpose, you can keep it, but there has to be a specific reason for that.
And just a reminder, everybody, if you have any questions, please use the question box to do that. We're monitoring that. So if you've got a question, please don't hesitate to do that. And I will be managing and screening the questions as they come in. So I guess we do actually have one question, which is I guess, because Nandeep brings up this, how long you keep the data. I don't know that this is necessarily related to the PDI, but the question, though, Kerry, is how long do you keep privacy information? Is that something why do we need to care about that so much here? Is that something that we have in a retention schedule, or why do we care about how long we keep the data?
I need you to know that I'm going to take the clip of you calling it privacy information, and I'm going to use that as your new ringtone.
Sorry, personal information. Sorry about that.
So the question, to repeat the question, because I got focused on that, to repeat the question, your question is, how long do you have to keep it? And that's a great question. And the answer is, you have to keep it for as long as necessary for the purposes for which it is collected. But also, there are lots of things, and this is a whole other separate series of webinars that we do. There are lots of reasons that information has to be kept because the law requires it, right? That's the whole point behind a retention schedule. A retention schedule is a combination of describing the information that the law requires that you keep as a record, and then the business reasons that you need to keep some of that information, because maybe the law doesn't care about you retaining your quarterly reports, but your business does. They're super important. So when you're retaining personal information, when you're thinking about how long you have to keep personal information, that's one of the things that you have to think about is what does the law require me to keep? What do my business practices require me to keep? And then don't keep it longer than that. But that's why you need a retention schedule so you know how long that is. You don't have to keep re-answering that question every time you get a data request. That is a separate webinar. We are not going to go into that anymore. Not
All
here
right.
anyway.
So then let's talk about how a PDI gets built. We've kind of laid the groundwork for what a PDI is. Let's talk about the best practices for putting together a personal data inventory. You know, we very much believed that there be a two-pronged approach to doing this. So a lot of organizations will just go out to IT and say, tell us all these things about personal information, and that really doesn't get the whole picture. So we recommend a two-pronged approach. Can you tell us kind of how that works?
So this is, I won't call this bottom up, top down, because I don't think that's accurate. I do think it's kind of left brain, right brain, right? So we approach this by looking at both the business process, the workflow, and then also the repository, because as anybody who has ever worked in an organization of any size knows, what the business thinks is happening within their systems is not necessarily what's happening with their systems. But it is also true that IT doesn't know why information is coming in the first place. They just know that it is. So you need to look at both sides. So we're looking at this on the workflow side. We're looking at this by asking, what are the business processes which are collecting and using personal information? What is the personal information that is coming in? Why are you collecting that data, the basis for processing? Where are you putting that data? How long are you keeping it? And then where do you send it? And that's all on the business side. So if you think about this from the perspective of a common business process, HR recruiting, right? We're going to look at this. They're going to collect information from an applicant. They're going to use that information as part of the application process. It's going to live in your HR information system. You're going to use it in and store it for a period of time following the closure of the job posting. Maybe you hang on to unsuccessful applicant information for a short period of time, couple years, and then you get rid of it. You don't share that information outside because there's no need to. And so there's your entire data flow. And you understand what the data elements are in there, but that doesn't tell you anything about where that lives. So the next question is, what are the standards that are being set on your information systems that are holding that data? And that's where Nandeep comes in. Nandeep.
Yeah, so on the system side, the very first step is, again, identifying all the repositories or systems you have. It's the first crucial step needed, which is to discover every location, whether it's official, unofficial, structured or not, where personal data is stored, whether it's on premises, it's in cloud or SaaS solution. But this ensures that the inventory is comprehensive and it's not just limited to known systems, right? There might be few systems that have more critical information, but we are trying to look at personal information across the organization, which is not just your sensitive data, but any information that is defined as personal information. And so your organization might already have a catalog of system maintained, which we see a lot of time. That you can leverage to get most of the systems, if not, but that's a starting point where typically you would come. If not, you would have to identify all those systems. And then you want to look for sizable data stores as well. And often then, that contains extracts from structured systems, because by identifying them, you can now also uncover those hidden copies or backups that might sometimes or most of the times goes unnoticed. You want to map out which external parties are involved in the data flows, whether they are inbound or outbound. And it helps to clarify who has access to that information, as well as it also highlights any potential risk or compliance that needs regarding data sharing. That typically, comes down to the agreements and the contracts or the MSS you have with those third-party providers. Additionally, you should also track how personal data enters and exits systems. And so this is where you are looking at the flow, right? And either whether it's from internal or external source, just to visualize the data flows. That helps also in spotting the vulnerabilities and ensuring that data is handled appropriate throughout the channels, different channels, and throughout its life cycle. And then Another important data collection point is reviewing the existing capabilities of the systems. Like, does the system have a capability to search information, find for information, modify or alter data, or even delete information in case there is a request from a data subject, as well as the data protection measures in place for each system. So that also helps to recognize the overall strength and gaps and the areas that needs enhancement to maintain the overall compliance and security. So these are just some of the data points, but that's pretty much what we do is when we are collecting a lot of information for repository analysis, so we know how that information is being managed, how it is processed, how it is flowing throughout the system inside and outside.
We have a question, and it's not related to this slide, but it's going back a couple slides. But Kerry, I want to see if you can answer this. This was, I think, in regard to your description of a company that you might be shipping products out. And the question was, I assume this is the same if I am the shipping company, the one that receives the information, I use it, and then I hold it according to my retention policies. Is there anything else that we need to consider?
Oh, that's such a great question. And the answer is there are probably a million things that you need to consider, but for the purposes of the high-level discussion that we're having today, I think having a retention policy that says we keep, retention schedule that says we keep information about what we've shipped for X period of time, and then following that retention policy is appropriate. Depending on what you're shipping, if you are shipping pencils, the risk and the documentation requirements are a lot different than if you're shipping nuclear waste, right? Those two things are separate, and the retention requirements related to documentation, bills of lading, etc. Are you importing the nuclear waste? Those things are going to be different. So if you have a proper retention schedule that says we receive information and ship according to this, and then we store this information for X period of time, and you follow that, that's fantastic. Please know that if you're doing that, you are doing the right thing. And no, I don't think that you still want to think about it. If we're talking about personal information, you still want to do your due diligence also and understand how you're receiving this information. You're getting it from your clients upstream, but you are storing this information in these systems, and you share it under these circumstances, and you maintain it for this period of time, and these are the controls that are available on the systems where you're sharing that data. You still want to go through this process even if you are a downstream shipper and you're not directly in contact with the end user customer.
All right. So we've talked about sort of the approach to doing a PDI. Let's take maybe a tiny step backwards just to say what's personal information. And I hope we can handle this. I think that the notion of what personal information is pretty broad these days. What is included when we think about personal information?
So personal information, we used to call it personally identifiable information. And if you work for the US federal government, you probably still call it that. It is much broader than just name, address, phone number, email address, the things that actually specifically identify Tom Mighell. A personal information is things that relate to a person, that identify the person or could make them identifiable given other information. And so the list of what kinds of things constitute personal information is extremely broad. You've got identifiable, you've got the personally identifiable information, name, etc., your other government issued ID numbers, biometric information. I'm not going to read this entire list because that will all fall asleep. But it does also include things that aren't necessarily automatically expected, like inferences drawn from all of this information. So if you are using some sort of analytics tool to make predictions or to understand how all of these things fit together to identify new marketing targets, that information may also be personal information. If you're making inferences about whether or not a particular person who's made a prior purchase from your organization might be likely to make a purchase in the future, that kind of information is also going to be personal information if it's directly related to a person who is identified or identifiable. So when you're talking to your organization about creating your PDI, you do not just mean name, address, phone number. You also mean other information relating to that person. Think about, for example, your employee ID. Most organizations have them. Your employee ID doesn't name you specifically, probably. It's, your employee ID may be ABC123, but ABC123 relates to a specific identifiable person that we could name by reassociating their employee ID. And so that makes that information all personal.
And I think that we can imagine that personal information isn't necessarily in one nice place to say, here's where you go to find all the personal information, and that it can be in lots of different places. Let's talk about that.
So Nandeep said a couple of minutes ago that you want to understand where the authorized and the unauthorized repositories are, right? So this isn't just what contracts has my company entered into to store this information. This is also what tools are people using in order to help them manage their workload, because personal information is going to live there also. And it's going to be structured, it's going to be unstructured, it's going to be your semi-structured data like email. Your organization may have cut off PST file creation, but you may still have PST files laying around. It's going to live there. Personal information can live in lots of different places, and you need to understand all of those places in order to be able to appropriately understand and manage all of that information.
And we have a quick question related to the idea of personal information. Is an IP address considered personal information?
Oh, that's such a good question. Depends on where you are. In Europe, it is specifically included in the definition of personal information. The United States hasn't gone quite that far, but IP addresses, if they can be associated with someone who can be identified, an IP address can be considered personal information.
What about Canada?
Yes, if you are in, same rules apply. If you are in Canada, an IP address, if it can be associated with other information relating to an identified or identifiable person, an IP address can be personal information.
And if you look at the slide of before this, when it says the technical information, it says anything that is like browser cookies or machine ID.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as long as you can identify going back, and there are ways to do that. It's personal information. It constitutes personal information.
Good question.
So let's do a quick case study. This is actually a set of collaboration tools from a company that we have worked with in the past. Who wants to talk about this?
So I'll kick it off, and then I'll kick it over to Nandeep. You can see that a lot of these are kind of the same, but there's a lot of that very noticeable blue Facebook F in this. People's organizations, employees are going to store information in a way that's going to make it easier for them to do their jobs. And also, if you are customer facing, you may have social media contact with some of your customers. And so personal information lives in a lot of places. You need to think about that. Nandeep, what else do you want to
No, I mean, you're right. And it's not just the files, right? It's also messages and communication, which a lot of people don't realize that they might be sharing things over unauthorized applications. Like one of the clients was using WhatsApp, even it was on a business account. But again, that is where information is being shared. So these are just like a lot of different ways where personal information can be shared, would be stored, and a lot of times this is like shadow IT. Your IT doesn't even know that these are the areas where people are actually using, just because the approved way of doing things is much difficult or harder or challenging. They end up subverting the whole process and storing things on their local systems or putting things where they should not be. But again, these are all the places where information could live, if there are not enough controls. And that is why also understanding, having a PDI helps that to know that where all these process locations where personal information is.
Well, and to be more specific about this particular company, they had no policy that required employees to talk to IT before they went out and found a tool. They empowered their employees to say, if you find something that makes you more productive, that allows you to collaborate more, by all means, go ahead and use it. And this is where it got them, is to a landscape of dozens of different applications that were not being governed. So being able to govern this and being able to control this is a good way to help manage a personal data inventory, because there's a lot of personal data in all of these applications. So if we're putting together a personal data inventory, what's the best way to do it? There are a couple different ways that you can put a personal inventory together, a personal information inventory together. What are some of the best ways to do it?
There are lots of tools that exist that can help, but we believe very strongly that the best set of information that you're going to get, at least to start your discussion, is going to be through talking to your business units, right? Interviews. And the reason for that is it's in you. You can scan your networks, you can scan your firewalls and see where connections are happening. You can do all of that, and that's great. But that's not going to tell you why that information is being collected in the first place, and it's not going to tell you about the shadow IT. So when you go talk to your business units, you will absolutely have conversations that end up with somebody going, hey, do you remember that data pull we did like 3 years ago and we couldn't find any place to store it on the network? And so we went out and got that Box account. Do we need to worry about that? You will absolutely hear that. I cannot tell you the number of interviews for personal data inventories that I have done where every time I do an interview, I promise the interviewees I am not judging. I am just asking. We are just doing information gathering right now. There is no judgment. There is no shame. I just need to know that you can be selling customer information on the internet, and I'm just going to write it down because I just need to know. I don't care what the answer is. And I get a lot of information from our clients where they're saying, yeah, we actually use Dropbox because we have really big files and we need to be able to share them, and our system can't handle the file load. So you have to do these interviews because using a scan is important and helpful and useful, but it is not going to get you everywhere, and it's not going to tell you why. It will just tell you what.
All right. So I want to actually get to the meat of the discussion, and I want to talk about I want to talk about whether or not we can. Is it possible to just throw a tool at this? Is buying a tool just the immediate thing that we should think about when we're creating a personal data inventory, or is that just not the right way to think about this?
So let me talk about this. I mean, the short answer is no. One cannot solely depend on tool while disregarding the crucial processes to gather all that required information for developing a personal data inventory. Just carries, like she said earlier, right? You need those interviews to be done. Now, data loss prevention tools and sensitivity labels are valuable, certainly. They efficiently identify all sensitive patterns such as SSN numbers and credit card details and banking details through email, to network communication, to cloud platforms like SharePoint, OneDrive, and even endpoints. And even automated classification also plays an important role just by labeling, content and record types at a scale. Though its effectiveness, hinges on the robust policies, ongoing tuning and training, and even then, it may overlook certain nuances. So ultimately, tools cannot provide context regarding the data, such as the workflow that brought that information in the first place, right? How was that collected? And whether it was collected or used appropriately, including the purpose and the legal basis, or the most suitable remediation step as what to do next. Should we delete? Should it be relocated? Should it be restricted? Should there be a retention? So it's not going to be able to have all that information or the knowledge. And so therefore, engaging people and implementing those effective processes always remains essential. You do interview business owners, you do interviews with the technical teams just to map the data flows end to end, where the data originates, who touches it, why it's needed, and which systems store it. Also, why personal information is shared outside of the organization. And then you assign the owners and do the necessary remediation actions or the steps.
All right, so we've got the information that we need to put our personal data inventory together. What's the best way to publish this? And there are tools that are out there that can help publish this, but at Control, we very much recommend using tools that you already have. That will always be our first recommendation, is leverage the technology that is already available to you rather than try to find budget for external tools. And one of the things that we have found is that using Microsoft Power Apps, which are part of the Microsoft 365 environment, is a useful way to create a personal or publish your personal data inventory. Nandeep, do you want to talk a little bit about what Power Apps are for those who may not be familiar?
Sure. So Power Apps is a suite of applications, services, connectors, and data platforms that provides a rapid application development or R&D environment just to build custom applications and solutions that specifically fits to the business processes or organization requirements. It's a very quick plug and play kind of solution from Microsoft. And it is a part of a broader Microsoft Power Platform environment that is a collection of low-code development tools that help businesses to create these applications and workflows, as well as automate tasks, and also provide insights. Like I said, it's a no-code, low-code solution, which makes it a great offering because it's something that can be used and even configured to an extent by people who are not super technical, like your subject matter experts or business leads or analysts supporting the business areas. Applications built using Power Apps are responsive, they are very user-friendly in design, and they can run seamlessly in browsers or mobile applications. So unlike traditional softwares, you don't have to download a client or a plugin to access the app. And being a part of the Microsoft universe, it leverages a lot of existing features within Microsoft 365 platform and can seamlessly integrate with various Microsoft tools and workloads. So within Power Apps, and I mean, one can quickly build those custom business apps that connect to the business data that is stored in the underlying data storage platform. So you could be using Microsoft's own data storage, which is the Dataverse, or you can connect to your existing SharePoint or an Excel or a SQL server. But that's basically how it's pretty easy to just do a plug and play and connect to those sources and use the capabilities of the Power Apps to display everything. In terms of licensing, Power Apps is included with all E1 to E5 licenses for commercial, for F3 licenses, as well as business premium and business essential licenses. So there is no additional charge, to procure Power Apps license, Power Apps for a separate license fees. And then the personal data inventory, which I'm just going to be demoing in a minute, and the portal that Control has designed, is created with Power Apps, and it does not require additional licenses as long as your organization has one of those licenses that I just mentioned.
So here's a question about Power Apps. Does Power Apps replace Microsoft Access? We still have Access databases.
Well, it does that and beyond that. I mean, Power Apps is not just a replacement of Access. I would say Power Apps is more of a replacement of multiple things, but one of them is, the forms or the designer that used to be in place back in the days, SharePoint Designer. And then along with that, because like I said, it is within the Microsoft universe, there are so many things you can integrate with Power Apps using the capabilities to do the workflow, to do the automation, to do building your basic CRUD applications. Behind the scenes, you will still need a database. So Power Apps is not a database. So that database could be your SharePoint, that could be a SQL server, that could be Oracle, that could be Dataverse, and that could also be an Access. So those things will still be there as the backend, place for storing your data. But Power Apps is more of, a connection of those together to present things in a certain way and to apply additional logic that fits your business needs and requirements.
Although I will add to that Power Apps is probably a better way of publishing and managing something like a personal data inventory or a record retention schedule than an Access database is. We used to deliver all of our materials we delivered in Access, and we stopped doing that because IT departments would have trouble supporting it. Sometimes it was complicated to use. So it's something that I think we definitely recommend as an alternative for publication and display. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, app access is typically considered as a UAC or user access controlled applications.
Yep.
And so those are a lot of times siloed and, specific teams just working on that. There's no enterprise level support now, and it's more of a traditional, system now.
All right, so what we want to do is we want to show you an example of what a personal data inventory might look like inside of Microsoft 365 Power Apps. And so Nandeep, if you want to take control and guide us on a tour.
Yes, let me do that. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know you can see my screen. Well, all good.
We can see it.
All right, yeah, so what you're looking here is just, again, a sample data for the personal data inventory that Contrail has built and that we've been, working with different clients to put it in their environment. But at a very high level, you can see this is a browser. As I said, this is a web player. You do not need a specific plugin to be installed or downloaded. You can go to a URL and it's a web player and it will play in that. And this is just a landing page where you can see all the different areas in which personal information is collected. There are business processes that leads to collection of personal information. There are systems that store personal information or processes it, and then there are third-party vendors with whom the personal information is shared, for one reason or the other to conduct the business. So if I do quickly to show, if I go into a business process, it will list all the different business processes that for a specific organization that were there in the use and collection of personal information. I can scroll through these and it will just show me everything about what the purpose is for collecting the personal information, how is that information collected, whose information is collected. It could be a visitor visiting the website whose data was collected through a browser cookie, or it could be someone who specifically requested to for certain information, filling a form, as a result of which the personal information was collected. It also says what is the use for collecting the information. And then there are some other fields that you can just go through just to show, if there's a notice provided upfront when collecting the information, is there an option to opt in, opt out, or which, you would see now a lot in all the different sites that you go to. But you can also use the search filter to filter out all the different, all the different processes. So if for example, I search for the word brand, at this point of time, it goes and starts filtering out, and it highlights all the places it finds that information. And I can further filter it out by saying, I'm looking for grants specifically, let's say, in the grants department. So now it filters down to only 5 different processes that are in collection of, grant application or grant management. I can further say, I'm only looking for those ones where there is no collection notice provided. And when I click that, it now just filters down to 3 out of those 5. So this allows me to look at, all the processes that are there so for a specific department that collects information, and then use that to, further manage that information and do necessary activities I need to. I can go and click on more details for a specific process, in which case it will give me all the details about a process, including, who the process owner is, what the data subject is, additional notes about it, and all that information that is collected over here. It also gives information about the downstream third parties where information is shared through this business process. I can similarly do the same thing when I go to applications. So if I just take this out, let me go back to the home page, and I can click on the systems, or maybe I can go from here and click on the systems. And this will again now load all the systems or repositories which collect personal information. Again, you can see there is a purpose of why the information is collected, whose information is collected, who's the data subject, where is the system hosted, what type of information is collected. So you can see here there is information like SSN that is also collected for a specific application that the client is working with. It has the contact details in case you need to reach out to someone for getting more details. And you can also, same thing, apply the filters over here. I can just write the same thing over here, and it tells me all the systems that are, using grants for the management. I can further filter down by saying I'm only looking for those systems which has sensitive personal information. And you can see it will now filter down to only just 2 of those applications that has that information. So this is pretty good in the way, you can have this one place or portal to look at all the personal information that is either captured via or part of your business process or through your systems. And similarly, as I said, you can look at the third party, with whom the personal information is shared. And here it will show the purpose of why the information is shared with third party, what type of personal information is shared, how it is shared. It could be different ways, and this is where you can apply the filters. That I'm only looking for those vendors through which information is shared through maybe FTP, and it will now filter down to only 3 of those vendors through which information is shared to FTP. So I can apply those criteria, and I can filter down to only specific vendors that I'm interested in looking at. I can also go and do a linking from here. So I can see that, with the DocuSign in this case, I want to look for all the third-party vendors, which information is shared from DocuSign. And in this case, it will go and look at or come back with only those vendors, third-party vendors, where information is shared from DocuSign. And it will also say what the purpose is for why you are sharing that information from a system. So it's pretty easy because you can now do linking. You can go back and forth and see, how all of this is connected together. And it's super useful when a request again comes from someone like a data subject or a terminated employee who wants to know where their information lives, where it is processed, and how it is collected. So this gives you one place to, one-stop shop to look for all the information that is managed. You also have reports that you can generate. Some canned reports, like for example, if I want to look at a list of all the third-party vendors that are out there, you can run the report and it will just give you a list of all those vendors that you can then later on go and export in an Excel or do whatever you want to do. And then for one more thing that I wanted to mention here, which is also pretty important, that I think is that it also allows you to link and unlink third-party vendors. So let's say if there is a specific system and has a new contract with another third party and he's sharing personal information, you can now go and link that by just clicking on the link button over here. And this will allow you to see all the third-party vendors that we are sharing information with. But on the right side, you will also see all the third-party vendors that you want to link with. So if a new third-party vendor came in, you can add that, and then you can then link it to the system. So that way there is a link associated with, and you can always see which are those third-party vendors where information is shared from the system. So that linking is pretty important according to me, because typically if you put this in a spreadsheet or you have an Access DB, it's not that easy to see all this linking, which is one of the selling point that we see in this kind of application. Go ahead.
I was going to say we have a question. So the question is, do we need to have IT to be able to update this database or this Power App? What if there's a new system, or if there is new information? Do we need to have? Is IT going to have to be the ones that update this?
It won't be IT. IT will certainly be deploying the first time, so that it's there, it's set up with the data source and also with the application. But once that's done, it would typically be someone who would be in charge. And I don't know, Kerry, if you can say more to this, typically from a privacy department, or someone who would typically be in charge of managing this PDI. All right. So as you can see over here on the top, if a new system comes in, it's not something that you have to go into backend, or IT does not have to do anything. As long as the person is a power user, they should be able to create a new system, or they can go and edit existing information if they want to. So if I click here, I can go and edit information, and I can go into various tabs that allows me to make changes. So it's pretty easy. It's a self-serving kind of application. And also, like I said, because It's within Microsoft 365. You do not need any extra licensing or additional setup to be done, configuration. It's just one-time deployment.
Yeah, we're going to talk in just a second about keeping your PDI updated, but just to add on to that, you know, you want to make sure that this is a living document. It's a living system, and that you are keeping it updated, and you would use all of your existing documentation requirements. So your data protection impact assessment, your privacy impact assessment, your risk assessments, all of those would also help feed into this. Your third-party risk management platforms that you're using to just sort of go through your regular contracting processes. All of those are going to help feed into this and help keep it updated. But no, the whole point behind being able to use tools such as Power Apps and this sort of Microsoft suite is that you don't have to be a power user. You don't, and by power user, I don't mean licensed. You do have to have the right license for it, but you don't have to be someone who is in IT and is an engineer in order to be able to do the updates. The version of the PDI that Nandeep is showing here has an update capability that a regular user is going to be able to go through and help update. Now, adding systems is a little bit more complicated because you want to make sure you're getting the right system information, but updating the PDI itself is something that can be done by a regular user to make sure that that information can always be kept updated.
And as long as,
thank you.
Sorry, keep going. I got a question though.
Yeah, I was saying, yeah, as long as you are a power user, because again, behind the scenes, it's Microsoft SharePoint that is storing all the data. You can use the capabilities of versioning. So let's say if you had multiple power users who are in charge of managing this, if someone changed something for whatever reasons, you can always go and look at the version history to see what changes were done with someone over a period of time, right? And I can just go at a detailed level to see all the changes that have been done over a period of time and what changes were done.
So we have a question, and the question is, it's a two-part question. The first part is, all this information comes from interviews and Power Apps is populated manually. And then the second question is, does it integrate with other tools? Not sure how you want to handle those separately or together.
So on the first, I can say on the first question, all the information that you're looking, yes, is collected through set of interviews, and eventually you are putting this into or loading into the underlying data source, which in this case is SharePoint, in a format that Power Apps can read. So that's that one-time effort I'm talking about. That initially you have to make sure that all that information you're collecting is in a certain format that you can load into Power Apps, and then going forward, it's simple maintenance of it. So that's your first question. And when you, second question, remind me, Tom, is it like whether it integrates with other applications?
Does it integrate with other tools?
The Power Apps integrates with pretty much everything that is, you can think of. It's like as long as you have the connectors. Now, in some cases, there might be premium connectors or licenses that you need. For example, like I said, Power Apps, Microsoft's own Dataverse is a license that you need to buy to be able to manage things over there. But that was one of the reasons we decided to choose SharePoint as the backend, because it's free. It comes with Microsoft 365. You don't have to charge or pay for any additional licenses. That said, if you choose to put things in a specific database that you are already paying for, you can always do that by connecting it to that data source.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about with this?
No, I think it's pretty much, this is what it is. It's very simple. If you see, there's not a whole lot going on, but behind the scenes, there is a lot of work that happens that Power Apps does the heavy lifting. You also have an area where you can typically, what a lot of organizations that work with do is that put their policies or quick links and support information or anything that people need to know about as they're managing this application. But that's pretty much it. There are not a whole lot of screens. It's very simple to manage.
And we have a related question, I think, which is to the last question, which is, can data from an existing spreadsheet data inventory be imported here?
It has to be in a certain format, but yes, it can import it. If it's because behind the scenes, the information that we collect typically in these interviews, it's raw data, right? So there are certain formats and certain data types in those databases, whether it's SharePoint or anything, that you have to make sure it matches with the norms. So you got to make sure that it is formatted in the right way, and as long as it's formatted in the right way, then you can go and load the Excel into the backend.
I've got another question here, which is, if you already use Varonis or Purview, how can it integrate with that?
So when you say integration, I would need more details on that, because I mean, Varonis is basically the purpose of what Varonis does, the purpose of what Purview do is different than what this application specifically does. This is only a maintenance of your personal data inventory. It's basically the only other way would be just keeping this in your Excel files and continuing, updating those areas where you're collecting all this information, or maybe invest in high-end tools, like I guess that is Archer or TrustArc, to just manage things at a very high level, which you might not need bells and whistles, extra things. This is more of just the maintenance of your personal data inventory. That said, like I said, Microsoft can, a Power Platform can integrate with a lot of things. There are a lot of connectors. So in a way, you can connect to Purview, but it really depends on what you want to do, after it connecting. So if all you want to do is basically to be able to quick up workflow to do certain things within Purview, and if those connectors and those capabilities are there, you can. But let's say if you want to use this to apply a sensitivity label in Purview, that is something it cannot do, because this is more of a maintenance of your personal data inventory. It is not creating any actions in your live data that is within Microsoft 365.
And then there's another question that I'll answer. This says, I understand you don't need a different Microsoft license, but how do we access this template in Power Apps? This is not a template. This is something that is custom designed. This is something that if you have a team that has Power App experience, you can design this internally. And as Nandeep mentioned, we built this using SharePoint as the backend structure for this, but there is not necessarily a template. This is a custom designed interface for the personal data inventory. All right, I'm going to switch back over real quick. We're almost done. Any last thoughts on updating? We've talked a little bit about how to keep it updated. Is there anything else in just the next minute or two that we can talk about updating? Nandeep?
Updating your PDI. So again, wherever you're managing, right, it's a living document, just like Kerry said. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining your PDI in a very simple way that can be managed, just like how I showed in Power Apps, where it's because you can see there is a lot of linking and cross-linking that happens. So it should be in a place loaded where it can be very simple, it's scalable, and it's repeatable. So you can do it again and again and again without having to go from one tab to another tab or one place to another place. It should be quite easy to navigate as well. So that makes your process repeatable and easy. Certainly you want to make sure that you are providing the access to only few power users who are in charge of managing this, and so that might require a simple light training. But again, it's not something that you need your IT department to be working on this, unless there are technical issues that happen where you cannot access something. That's a different thing. But just to manage this application, you just need one-time training, and that's as easy as that. You can also, like I said, with the reports, you can make the PDI available. You can export those and make it available to them, so they can look at all the information, their personal information is stored in different business processes and through the application. And then if there are any changes that needs to be done, you can either have a proper change management process in place, so that any changes are all tracked, as I showed with the application that we have. It tracks everything because you have versioning enabled, so all changes are always tracked and everything can be audited. But all of that needs to go through a proper process, so that even though these are power users, it's possible they might end up making mistakes. It's quite common. That's pretty much you do is like basically also you gotta keep on updating your notices. Kerry can talk more about that on the privacy notices and all your contracts, and even with third parties, making sure that any third party that you engage, there is somewhere mention of how they are going to be using your personal information in your contracts, and there are necessary clauses around information that will be retained. So that is also one of the important thing to make sure that when information gets removed or deleted from your system, it also goes away from your third parties that you are sharing that information with. So that way it's always updated at both ends. And the last thing, Kerry, you want to talk about the privacy impact assessments?
We are just about out of time, Nandeep, so we are going to call this. We don't want to keep anybody much later. Just a little bit more about Contour. We're the largest independent provider of information governance, AI governance, and personal data inventory providers. We have offered, for those of you who aren't familiar, we offer a free 60-minute virtual in-house information governance seminar. It's not a sales pitch. CLE credit is available for your legal team if necessary. We just talk about best practices in information governance. If you have trouble getting people to understand what needs to be done in your organization, we can come in and really talk about what best practices are and what companies in your industry should be doing. We've got some upcoming webinars coming up here, a very basic, back to basics, information governance 101 in April. In May, we're doing real world data deletion strategies. Everyone is interested in deletion these days. And if you're familiar with the Contour website, we have a lot of content out there. We've got white papers, webinars, all sorts of materials. Don't hesitate to visit contour.com. Happy to provide you with the information that you need. With that, we're a little bit past time. Thank you very much for joining us. We wish you success in publishing your personal data inventory. Chloe?
Thank you again to Tom, Kerry, and Nandeep for today's interactive and informative webinar, and thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one on April 9th, Information Governance 101.